In this video, we're going to be talking about how to find the distance between 2 points, or in other words, finding the length of a segment. So the length of a segment can be measured by finding the distance between its two endpoints. So if we can talk about the coordinates of the endpoint, then we can find the distance between them. We'll come back to this graph, but here we have some segments. We're going to find the distance between those 2 points. First of all, let's figure out how we can do that. Distance is always going to be a positive value. You'll never see road signs that talk about negative miles to the next town. Distance is always a positive value. In math, we use a special symbol called the absolute value symbol. The definition of absolute value is just the distance a number is away from zero, or the origin. And it looks like two vertical bars. So if you see a number in between two vertical bars, you're going to try and make that value always positive or always non-negative. For example, the absolute value of -4, we're going to make that value positive. It's going to be +4. But don't get fooled. We're not talking about opposites. So if the value in between the two absolute value symbols is already positive, don't make it negative. Just keep it positive. So absolute value symbols keep something positive or make it positive. We want non-negative values to come out. So we can use those absolute value symbols to find distance because we know we want it to be a positive value. There are two different distance formulas that we'll talk about right now, and then we'll get to a more complicated one later on. We can find horizontal distance or we can find vertical distance. If we're talking about horizontal distance, we're just caring about the x values or horizontal values. So we're going to subtract the two x coordinates, and it really doesn't matter which one you call x1 or x2. As long as we put them in between these absolute value symbols, it's going to give us the same answer regardless of which number we substitute here, as long as we're substituting x values. So we're going to find the difference between two horizontal points, and that helps you remember the formula maybe. Difference is the math word that we use to symbolize subtraction. So if you're thinking that distance is the difference between 2 points, maybe that'll help you remember that it's a subtraction problem. So we'll use this diagram up above. We're going to find the distance between A and B. And let's look at these coordinates. So we got a horizontal distance here. The coordinates for A are -4, 2, and the coordinates for B are 3, 2. So we got our coordinates here. But we don't care about the vertical or y values because we're looking for a horizontal distance. So we're just going to focus on the x values. I can call x1 -4, and I can call x2 +3, and it really wouldn't matter if I swapped them. We'll do an example later on where I do swap them. And we're going to do that subtraction. Real quick, before we do that, there's a special symbol that we read as distance, or the length between two endpoints. It's just the two endpoints put together. It kind of looks like they're being multiplied, but don't think like that. So normally you might see a symbol up here that symbolizes whether it's a segment, array, or a line. So if you don't see that symbol and you just see 2 points put together, that means the distance between A and B, or the length of segment AB. So let's plug those x values into our equation. The absolute value of -4 minus 3 is the absolute value of -7, and we're going to make that value positive. So the distance from A to B is 7, or the length of segment AB is 7. So we use that symbol to describe it, and we read it, the distance from A to B is 7, or the length of segment AB is 7. And you can always verify if you have a graph, we could count. The amount of units between A and B is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it makes it real easy if you have a graph. But eventually, we're going to do problems where we don't have a graph in front of us. We're just given the coordinates. So we got to know how to use this equation and find the distance between those 2 points using an absolute value equation. Let's talk about a vertical distance. So the same thing, we're still finding the distance between 2 points, but we're just doing it vertically. So we're talking about y values instead of x values. So the only difference in our equation is that they're y values instead of x values. And we do the problem the exact same way. Find our coordinates. C is going to be at -4, -1, and D is going to be at -4, -4. And again, because we're looking for that vertical distance of a vertical segment, we're going to ignore the x values and we're just going to focus on the y values. I could call y1 -1. I could call y2 -4. And we just plug them into our formula. -1 minus -4, we're going to take the absolute value of that. So the absolute value of 3 is just 3. It stays positive. So remember, double negatives are going to turn into addition, so this is really -1 plus 4. That's how we get positive 3. So the length of segment CD, or the distance between CD, that's that symbol, is 3. And again, we can verify it. I count from C to D. 1, 2, 3. Like I said, it doesn't matter if we had swapped our 1s and 2s. It doesn't matter which one you use. So if I had to reverse this, if I had called y1 -4 and y2 -1, then in my equation I would have the absolute value of -4 minus -1. Again, I got these double negatives that are going to cancel and become positive. So -4 plus 1 is -3. And that's where these absolute value symbols make a difference, because the absolute value of -3 gets us the same answer, a positive 3. So it doesn't matter which is x1 or y1, which is x2 or y2. That absolute value equation is going to help us get the same answer. To find that diagonal distance, this distance from E to F, this diagonal distance, is going to take a little bit more knowledge about geometry before we can get to it. But we can do horizontal and vertical distances by using these absolute values. So to find a diagonal distance, we need to know more about right triangles and the Pythagorean theorem. If you already know the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If I square root both sides and I solve for c, I get this distance formula. And the distance formula really works for any type of line. It could work for horizontal and vertical distances. We just don't have to mess with it yet. So look ahead for that. So hopefully you understand how to find horizontal and vertical distances using absolute value and the distance formula, just simplified a bit using that subtraction symbol.